But my guest is here, and let me bring him in. We are joined with the one, the only, Ray McGovern. How you doing, Ray? You doing okay this morning?
I'm waking up now, Jamal. Yeah, I'm out of town. That's why I'm not in uniform. Uh,
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. I appreciate you joining me. No, I just appreciate you showing up
but
and joining me. Just to let the
tell the
audience
truth
know,
anyway.
Ray McGovern, he's an American political activist, former Central Intelligence Agency officer. McGovern was a CIA analyst from 1963 to 1990, and in the 1980s, chaired the National Intelligence Estimates and participated in prepping the president's daily brief. Wow, that is um, that is very interesting considering the times that we're in now. I want to ask you something. So Donald Trump yesterday went and made a stinker at the United Nations. But beyond the stinker at the United Nations, he also put out a tweet. And I've read this tweet. I think you probably have seen this tweet at this point yourself, where he points out after getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine Russia military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it's causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. With time and patience and the financial support of Europe, and in particular NATO, the original borders from where this war started is very much an option. Why not? Russia's been fighting aimlessly for 3 years or 3.5 years in a war that should have taken a real military power less than a week to win. This is not distinguishing Russia. In fact, it very much making them look like a paper tiger. When the people living in Moscow and all the great cities, towns, and districts all throughout Russia find out what's really going on this war, the fact that it's almost impossible for them to get gasoline through long gas lines, that all of this is a lie. That one is particularly a lie. They would know better, right? Through gas lines that are being formed, and all other things that are taking place in the war economy, where most of the money is being spent on fighting Ukraine, which is great spirit and is only getting better. Ukraine would take back their country in its original form, and who knows, maybe go further than that. Putin and Russia are in big economic trouble, and this is the time for Ukraine to act. In any of it, I wish both countries well. We will continue supplying weapons to NATO, and NATO can do whatever they want with those weapons. Good luck to all. Basically, like, I'm out. I'm Trump. I'm out. Give me your take on that speech before just stepping into it. I want your point of view on what the hell is going on in that tweet.
Well, Jamal, there's an alarmist view that Trump has changed his mind on Ukraine, and that change in policy, that alarmist view, in my view, is far too alarmist, so to speak.
Yes.
Yesterday, we hear that one of the senior White House officials walked that back. He said, this is the way Trump negotiates. Well, that may work selling real estate in New York City. It's not going to. He's totally unpredictable. So people who waste an awful lot of time looking at exactly what he said, well, you have to realize that he just came away from a session with Zelensky. Right. Zelensky was the last guy Trump talked to, and I guess maybe he had too many Diet Pepsis or Diet Cokes because he was feeling really strong, and he said all these crazy things. Now, none of them are true, and the Russians are wise enough not to overreact because, as I say, the White House has already walked that back. It's stupid on its face. So those who want to take it seriously, the Russian economy is doing just fine, thanks.
Yes.
They're the only one with positive growth.
Yes.
And the army is winning. The reality is that the Russians are giving Trump a chance to have a negotiated settlement in Ukraine because they don't want a deal that just makes them do this again, have to do this again in 6 or 7 years. They don't want to go and take over all of Ukraine. I mean, that would not make any sense to a sensible person like Putin. I mean, he knows about Vietnam, he knows about Afghanistan, he knows that's a really dumb thing to do. So, what does he want? He wants the United States to back a plan where there's a core interest the U.S. the U.S. of Russia, which is recognized by everyone, and there's a sort of a cordon sanitaire zone where there's a separation between forces, universally recognized by the UN as well. And will he get that? Well, God knows, but it doesn't really matter to Putin. He's winning, okay? And if he can get this from Trump, that would be good. But he can prevail in Ukraine and is doing so without any concessions from anyone, especially the Europeans. And the last thing is that the Alaska summit made it very clear that Trump gave a major concession. Before, the Western view was there had to be an immediate ceasefire and then negotiations. And of course, he tried that with Putin, and he said going in on the plane he'll be very disappointed if he didn't get an immediate ceasefire or some kind of deal like that. And then, 2 hours after their meeting, he said, "Well, no ceasefire now. We're going to go for the whole enchilada." So don't listen to what, I mean, you have to listen to what Trump says one day, but don't expect the same thing the next day. And lastly, I'll just say, I used to prepare and actually brief one-on-one the President's daily brief early down in Washington. Now, I pity my opposite number in the Kremlin. You know, what's he going to tell Putin? I mean, I think Putin's getting good advice. Don't overreact, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Trump has to do some of these things for the Lindsey Grahams of this world. Keep your cool. You're winning. I think Trump will come around because Witkoff has got his head screwed on right. The others don't deal with Witkoff.
You think Wickoff has this? Well, okay, before I get to Wickoff, I think I agree with most of what you're saying, and I want to step into it. So from this part in the, as you say, all of these things are lies, but he clearly in this tweet puts it off on Europe. Like you can honestly you can ignore most of the stuff because most of the stuff is just fluff and lies, but the parts that are more lucid when he's like, right here, for example, he says, is in trouble in Russia. I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win Ukraine back. Meaning, you guys can do that. Europe can pay for it. Here's this bag, right? I'm gonna let you handle that bag. And then even at the bottom, where he's like, Ukraine will be able to take their country back in its original form. Who knows? They may even go further. Russia's in big economic trouble. This is the time for Ukraine to act. In any event, like I say, in any event is very dismissive. In any event, I wish both countries would. I wish both of you would.
On
And
the
then
face,
he put, oh, please, I'm sorry.
of it, Jamal, it's delusional, right?
Yeah.
You can't look at it apart from all the other things that Trump has done, and you can't look at it apart from how the Russians have reacted. Now, let's take over all of Ukraine, and maybe even go farther.
Like Kursk. Like maybe you can go to Kursk again, right?
Yeah, maybe to Moscow. Who knows?
But it's that last part where he's like, yeah, we'll give NATO weapons and NATO can do whatever it wants. Effectively, again, the entire thing seems to be distract with nonsense, but make it clear this is Europe's war now. This is not me. This is Europe's war and NATO's war. I'm not in it. I'm out. It's very strange in that way.
You're a lot younger than I. I think it would apply to be a briefer of the president's daily brief because you could do a really good job in pointing out how delusional it is. Here's the syllogism, if you want to call it that. We're going to sell weapons to the Europeans. We don't have those weapons yet, but we'll give them a couple of years, and our production line is not. But when we get those weapons, we're going to give them to the Europeans, and they're going to pay for them. And they don't have the money to pay for them just yet, but that's okay. And when we got them, then when they're going to give them to the Ukrainians who don't have any soldiers to man them.
Right.
That is all right. Give me a break now. Luckily, people like Steve Witkoff said, "Look, the Russians are laughing at you here. You could say these things, and the Post and the Times can go crazy, but for God's sake, don't wait a day to walk it back." And indeed, the Washington Post this morning says, "Oh, it's a negotiating tactic," and it just wants to show that Trump is not happy, not at all happy with Vladimir Putin. Oh, well, all right. Will he come? I don't know. He's totally unpredictable, but he's lost, okay? And so have the Europeans. So you're quite right in stressing that this is another step saying, all right, you guys, no. My colleague or my advisor, Kellogg, that brilliant general with 3 stars he used to have, well, he tells me that Russia's lost. And so you should be in pretty good idea here, pretty good shape. So go ahead, we're out of here. And if more further proof were needed, the vice president said 3 weeks ago, "We're done with Ukraine. We're not going to give them another cent." Now, do I rejoice about that? Well, I rejoice at stopping the killing, but
Yeah,
we led Ukraine down the garden path, for God's sake.
we did.
It's 11 years since John Mearsheimer warned, look, you try to get Ukraine and NATO, all hell's going to break loose, and it will result in the destruction of the country. Right? That's what's going to happen, you idiots. Don't do it. Well, they did it anyway, even though Obama, whatever it was smart enough to say publicly, God, it was 10 years ago, 2015, to say, look, the worst thing we can do for the Ukraine would be to give them the idea that they could prevail over a much stronger Russia right on their border. And so let's not give them any offensive weapons so they start a damn war with Russia. And then there was the Deputy Secretary of State working in the Obama administration, and he said, "You're absolutely right, Mr. President, because every weapon we give to the Ukrainians, the Russians could match, and then double, and then triple, and quadruple," end
Yeah.
quote. And that happened to be Deputy Secretary of State at the time, Antony Blinken.
Really?
Yeah.
That was Blinken?
Now, yeah, so people don't know that, but so Joe Biden comes in and he says, now we got to get the Russians. Antonio, yes, sir, we get the Russians. And here we are. Here we are with upwards of 1 million young Ukrainian dead.
Yep.
Half that for Russia dead. And the head of the NATO outgoing, Jens Stoltenberg, bragging about how when the Russians said, look, we want a treaty which would guarantee no Ukraine NATO, Stoltenberg said before the EU Parliament, he said, we said no. So he invaded just like he said he would if we said no. But he wanted to stop NATO enlargement, and we got Finland, and we got
Yeah.
so he got NATO enlargement anyway. Give me a break. What?
Yeah.
I mean, I got adjectives I can't use, but my God, the leadership of NATO, 1 million people dead by then. This was just 2 years ago. So I get a little upset because people are paying a price for this. The Ukrainians, first and foremost, and I feel sorry for the way they've been taken down the garden path.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. I guess the wild part, I want to step into something you said, though. You said it would be dumb to take over all of Ukraine. But would it be.
A little louder on my connection here in this hotel.
Oh, I'm sorry. You said it would be dumb for Russia to take over all of Ukraine. That's not something they want to do. I agree with you that that's not something they want to do. But wouldn't that be a better alternative as opposed to having Ukraine a rump state that NATO fills up with weapons once again, where they're going to have to do this all over? Meaning, it's very possible that there's not going to be a deal. And it's very possible that what Europe wants is to force Russia to swallow Ukraine whole, meaning they don't have an out for this. Congress is not going to approve any kind of deal. Like, they're not going to do it. Europe is probably not going to approve any kind of deal. So Russia seems to be, for the lesser of all lesser evils, taking it all. Or correct me if I'm wrong, if you think I'm wrong on this.
No, you're right, but the situation on the ground is what determines what happens here.
Right.
Now, Ukraine can become just sort of uh, like a food producer for the rest of Europe if it's denied access to the Black Sea. That means Odessa.
Right.
Now, the Russians have been relatively, well, they've been flexible on Odessa. 3 years ago, Putin, at the end of one of these 4-hour Q&As, said, look, Odessa is a beautiful city. It's founded by Catherine the Great. We don't, it could be a way to resolve our problems, or it could be, what do you, oh, yeah, a яблоко раздора. Okay, яблоко is the apple, right?
Mhm.
Раздор, conflict. So he's going back to the Trojan War, for God's sake. Apple of discord, or it could be a way of reaching things. Now, the Russians have not taken over Odessa yet. They don't want
Right.
to. It's a beautiful. I've been there. It's a beautiful city, and most of the people there don't want to be destroyed. So, those kinds of negotiating uh, positions are available. And actually, Lavrov and Putin himself has said, "Look, we're flexible. We can deal on some of these other issues, but you're not going to get Ukraine and NATO. Why don't you just fess up to that and say, okay, we give up. We're not going to. Mearsheimer was right. We've destroyed Ukraine. Okay, we'll give it up on that. Why don't they just do that and work out a deal? Well, Trump has his own problems with his own Lindsey Grahams and all. So the Russians are ready. Whether they have to go take over more than they really want to chew,
Mhm.
I would be provoked into doing that. I think the situation on the ground will dictate to the Europeans, oh my God, we have no money to buy the weapons that the U.S. doesn't have to sell us. And besides, if we get any such weapons to Ukraine, they don't have in them. I mean, however dense the coalition of the tone deaf, or whatever you want to call of the lemmings, okay? However tone deaf they are, in a couple of months, some of them will be removed. I mean, already France, the government has fallen. Starmer, I'd give about 3 more weeks. Merz, well, I'll just say one last thing about Merz. The Russians have a history with quasi Nazis and real Nazis, okay? Now, when I joined the CIA 150 years ago, okay, the Glavny Vrak, okay, the main enemy was the Soviet Union. No doubt
Right.
about it. We were their main enemy. Now, guess what? 3 months ago, reputable polls in Russia have showed that we've lost our top spot on that. Who's the main enemy now? Germany. Again, the Russians have had their experience with Germany. And they're taking off all the gloves. And Merz, if he continues to say, we once again, his words, we once again are going to be the supreme power in Europe. Well, watch out there. Watch out there, Merz, because the Russians are not going to tolerate that. And they have the means to make sure that you don't do that. So, I'm not talking for Putin. All I'm saying is that we are lucky, and I will say this outright, we are lucky that he is so perspicacious. He's so gradual and so level-headed that he's going to play these fools for what they are, give them time. Meanwhile, step by step, he's taking over what's left of the Ukrainian forces. And once again, that's the name of the game. He doesn't care about taking more territory. He cares
Mhm.
about destroying the Ukrainian army and then denazification in Kiev. Denazification is a real tough thing to do. The army is almost destroyed. You know, he's playing the long game, and it has been 11 years since Mearsheimer predicted exactly what's happening.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Mearsheimer said it was going to be an ugly victory. Russia obviously was going to win, but it was going to be an ugly win because
Yeah.
Europe is not necessarily going to
Yeah.
effectively give leeway.
A little footnote here, Jamal. I asked John May, he's a friend of mine. I asked him on air about 3 years ago now. John, you're in Washington now. Has the State Department or CIA asked to chat with you? You have different views, very interesting views, realistic views. And he smiled and he said, Ray, I've been at this for 35 years. Never once has anyone from the U.S. government, CIA, State Department Defense. Never once have they asked to talk to me for me to share my views, however odd it may seem to them. And I said, "Holy Moses, isn't that it? They live in this little cocoon, and many people believe what General Kellogg says: we're winning, just the Russians are losing." And that appears in this Truth Social thing that you mentioned
Mhm.
there. Why Trump on one day listens to Zelensky and Kellogg, and then the next day says, "Well, I'm just trying to negotiate, and I'm not happy. I'm not at all happy with Mr. Putin."
You did the briefing for the president.
I did.
Like, when who controls the information in that briefing? Do you control information? Like, meaning you need to go to the president and explain to him what's taking place today. And either somebody lied to Trump, like flagrantly, remorselessly lied to him, um, or he's lying. I don't know which. Like, meaning,
Well, if you look at the people who bubbled to the top, okay, they're all trained at these prestigious places like Stanford and Yale and Harvard by hardline people, some of them Polish emigres, and they're taught to hate the Russians. Okay? To
yeah,
hate and to say, "Oh, Mr. President, you're never going to prevail unless you realize you have to confront the Russians." Those are the people that are briefing Trump, and we're briefing Biden. Who told Biden just months, well, let's see, almost a year after the Russians entered Ukraine, invaded Ukraine, who told Biden that, "Oh, no, no worries, the Russians are running out of the weaponry that they'll,
fighting with
they'll
shovels.
you know, no indigenous capability to produce these weapons." I mean, that was December 2022. Now, July next year, 2023, Biden is told to say by William Burns of the CIA, "Look, the Russians already lost in Ukraine, and their army has been held up to ridicule from the rest of the world. Don't worry." Now, who told Bill Burns and this lady I forgot her name, Avril Haines, to
Yeah.
tell the public publicly that the Russians have lost? Well, these same people who have now been cashiered by Tulsi Gabbard, and there's another tale because the deep state is really after Tulsi because she's names, and now the president has insisted that since the evidence is there, the Justice Department has to act on it. Grand juries have been impaneled, and none other than the former head of the FBI, James Comey. People expect him to be indicted, well, next couple of days. Is there grounds to indict him? There, you bet your booty there are. How do you explain? This is kind of something that usually people don't know. How do you explain why Comey felt free to violate every law and regulation, to make sure that first that Trump didn't win. Okay, that's documented, and then after he won, to kind of emasculate him, and that's not too strong a word with respect to relations with Russian. Well, he says it in his book. Somebody helped him write a book about about a year,
Write a book.
and he says, and this is a quote. Okay, quote. "I was operating in an environment where Tulsi Gabbard was sure to be the next." I'm sorry. "I was operating in an environment in which Hillary Rodham Clinton was sure to be the next president of the United States. Period." End quote. Well, I mean, surprise, surprise. If you're sure that she's going to be the next president, you do everything you can, violating law and regulations, because then you might become attorney general or so. There's no chance she's going to lose. So,
Right.
taken now, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, has the evidence on them. It's documentary, it's sworn testimony, it's all kinds of stuff. Whether she will be able to prevail against the combination of the deep state, the media that won Pulitzer Prizes for spewing these lies, and Congress, that remains to be seen. This is the most important juncture, holding the deep state accountable, if it works out that way, that I've ever seen. And I joined the CIA in 1963, There's never been a situation like this. The odds are no better than even that
Hmm.
Trump will help Tulsi prevail. Many people think he'll throw her under the bus when he has to. I can't say they wouldn't do that. So a lot is at stake here in whether he supports getting rid of these people who are clearly guilty of all manner of crimes documented and given to the Department of Justice. That's not Tulsi Gabbard's purview. She said at that very big briefing. Look, you ask whether statute of limitations or well, that's a really good question to ask Pam Bondi because she's got this now. It's up to her. And as I say, just 5 days ago, Trump said, "Look, Pam, for God's sake, you got the goods on these guys. Proceed against them." And the most recent reports is James Comey will be first. John Brennan will well deservedly be second runner-up. And then you have people like James Clapper, who is the director of National
Yeah,
Intelligence,
Clapper Lab for
all kinds
Congress.
of Comey's deputy. All these people, the evidence is out there. And Cash Patel, where do you find it? In burn bags in a secret little room that nobody.
Bags.
That's not good tradecraft, guys. That's not good tradecraft.
um, I want to ask you about something else. So you were in the CIA. What was your experience with Israel when you were in the CIA? I'm curious because you have a very interesting point of view because you're behind the scenes. Like people like me can only look at what they're doing and postulate and have a certain point of view based upon historical context. But it may be different in the way that they think. The people who I've talked to who've worked in government often have a different point of view than the people who haven't worked in government. And I find that difference in point of view very interesting. So just to step into this issue for a moment, what was the experience with the US government and Israel when you were in the CIA? Or was there, did you have contact with Israel in this way or any kind of close contact?
Jamal, you asked excellent questions. Here it
Well,
is.
thank you for that.
I started under President John F. Kennedy.
Wow.
He wanted to hold Israel to task. He told them, look, we know what you're doing there in Dimona. We don't want you to have a nuclear weapon. But Kennedy was undermined by Allen Dulles and James Jesus Angleton. Angleton was like this with the Israelis, okay? And uh, if I wrote something on Russian foreign policy at the time, and I mentioned Israel in it, it had to go through Angleton to get his okay.
Really?
So that's how bad it was. Now, there are people who think that the Israelis had as much incentive as anyone else to get rid of John F. Kennedy. I don't think the evidence is there. There's plenty of evidence that the CIA and the Defense Department, those generals, and Alan Dulles, who
Mhm.
covered were responsible, but that doesn't rule out some kind of Israeli engagement. So, yeah, the other thing I'll say is that while I was working there as the head of the Soviet foreign policy branch at the time, 1967, during that Six-Day War, when the Israelis deliberately attacked the USS Liberty,
Yes.
35 sailors, uh, wounding 170 plus more. And when LBJ told the naval commanders out there of the aircraft, two of them, and they had already sent their planes out to do battle with whoever was attacking their ship in international waters. LBJ called them back. He told these admirals, look, we don't want to embarrass our ally, Israel. So that's how bad it was. It was then that I realized, and many people also, that Israel realized they could get away with murder, to include U.S. Armed Services Navy, and we wouldn't even we would cover it up. So, oh, it was a terrible mistake. When I knew from the hard evidence that the Israelis know exactly what they were doing, and that's public now, plane to control tower, but that's an American flag. Those are American ships. Follow your order. Follow your order. Boom, boom. And I know the head of the Marine detachment there, Bryce Lockwood, Marine Sergeant, who was carrying the sensitive commo equipment with a big rock to drop it overboard. Okay, he was behind the bulwark when the torpedo came from the two two torpedo boats, okay, uh, breached where all his men were working, intercepting things, and most of them just drifted out to sea through this big hole. He came in, oh, what was happening. So two of them left, grabbed one of them, they closed the hatch on him. Bang! He got attention. He got one of them up through the hatch. Come back, the other one just washing out. So you want to talk about PTSD? Talk
Yeah.
to a survivor, and particularly Bryce Lockwood, who's still alive, still kicking, and still able to explain in gory detail what happened to all his men, his entire Marine detachment, on June 8th, I think. Well, yeah, June 8th, 1967.
And they covered it up.
Yeah, the Navy participated in the cover up, which, I mean, that actually it was John McCain's dad who was high enough there to have, he had enough stripes or stars or whatever the Navy has to put the kibosh on the investigation. But Admiral Moorer, who was chief of staff of the U.S. Armed Forces and ambassador to London, I mean, he did his own investigation, and that's available, but you won't find it in the New York Times or the Washington Post because that's the other part of the story. They cover this stuff up because of the inordinate influence of the Zionist lobby. I don't say Israeli or Jewish, Zionist that keeps these things out of the consciousness of the American people.
How do you see that relationship today? Do you see
I'm
this as the
sorry?
tail? How do you see this relationship today? Do you see this as the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail?
God, I wish you hadn't asked me that. In one sense, it's worse than ever. I mean, who would have thought that our country, the United States of America, would be condoning, arming, financing, urging on genocide,
Yes.
forced starvation, for God's sake? Now, Biden was bad enough, but Trump has been doing this now for as long as he's been in power. What do the Israelis have on him, for God's sake? Well, maybe it's just the good old Israel lobby and the likes of Lindsey Graham. But I suspect there's another thing, and it has to do with this fellow called Epstein. My
Do
guess.
you? So
I was
you
going
don't
to.
think you don't think this is just they're a colony. We want to have them to have hegemony in the Middle East, and so we work with them in this. You don't think it's that. You think there's something else that's going on behind the scenes.
Well, I think there may be. Now, I speculated about this about a month ago, but then there became some hard evidence. A former Mossad case officer, agent, okay, who worked with Epstein and the whole schmear, who was sort of their handler for Mossad, came out on a public interview and said, "For God's sake, whatever they have on you, and I know about this, Mr. Trump, please just confess. You'll feel better. You'll stop the killing. For God's sake, please." So the guy has a conscience, okay? His name is Ben Menashe, and he's a reliable source because my tutor, Bob Perry, Bob Perry in Consortium News, dealt with him, and he was a lucrative source on the October surprise when Reagan uh, won the presidency. So this guy has a record, okay? So there he is. So McGovern is speculating. Now there's a little bit of evidence. It's not proven, of course, but if that's a factor, then you have heinousness squared, for God's sake. You have genocide, forced starvation, for what? For covering up abusing underage girls, for God's sake. My goodness, how bad can it get? So these things need to be exposed, and I think Trump is misguided in giving Netanyahu the idea that if he strikes out against Iran, my God, what's going to happen? Okay, now what's going to happen is this: Iran can retaliate in a way they can destroy a lot of Israel. Then what's Netanyahu going to do? Well, he's got an ace in a hole, right? The He's going to pull down these pillars with the Samson option, which is using just one of these little mini nukes. Okay, all bets are off if he does that, and the genie is out of the bottle. People say, "Oh, Netanyahu would never do." Well, give me a break. A guy who can force starvation, who can blackmail if that's the case. He's going to refrain from in extremis from using his only ace in the hole. Give me
He
a
will use it. He
sure of
will
that.
use it.
Why there's a
Yeah.
pre on telling Trump, look, he's going to do this if you give him any encouragement to head out after Ukraine yet again. All my Middle Eastern friends, specialists say he's going to do it. Okay, Netanyahu's going to do it. So is Trump able to stop him? He is, but he's got all these things weighing on his mind. Can I stop him? Yeah, he can. Let's tell Trump as clearly as we can. Look, this will be bedlam if you let Netanyahu have his head again and let them strike off after Iran. They can make all the more so since they have Russia and China on their side now.
Speculate for me. What happens if Israel fires that nuke? Because there's a story. I'm said it's stronger than a rumor that in the last 12-day war, that when Israel was effectively taking a beating, Netanyahu went to Trump and said, "We're going to use nukes," and Trump said, "No, no, 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 no. I'll take care of it." In which case, Trump gets involved, does the bombing, tells Iran, "Hey, we're going to bomb the site. Do whatever you need to do." In which case, Iran moves the material, and you can respond to us. Basically, theater in order to effectively stop Iran from continuously pounding Israel. And so, if he's able to do that once, well, he can easily. I mean, that's proof of concept, right? Like the moment that you said, "Well, I'm going to use nukes," now that we've gotten involved in something that we can't extricate ourselves from. So,
Well,
if he,
yeah,
no,
no,
what?
don't mean to interrupt, but I
No,
think
you're fine.
how it ended. The Iranians took out Haifa. The Houthis took out some airfields in Israel.
Yes, they did.
Positive that this time the Iranians had a deterrent. This time they could get into Israel despite all these fancy defense systems that the U.S. has given Israel. And so what happened? Netanyahu was told by Trump, look, stop it. We're going to stop it now. We're going to pause it because this is coming to a no good end. As the Chinese used to use that expression, this will come to a no good end. Well, they stopped it because Israel was taking it on the chin
Yep.
from that hypersonic missiles against which there is no defense, no matter how fancy or how expensive they are from the U.S. So that's how it ended. Now, that persuades me that and makes me hope, despite all the opinions of my Middle Eastern and Israeli and Arab colleagues, that he won't try it again. But I know he won't try it again if Trump stands up and says, "Look, you tried that before. Look, we had to end it to save your rear end. Okay, this time we're not going to save your rear end. So don't even try it." Whether Trump has the cojones to say that to Netanyahu, well, there are all these other factors that militate against that. I just hope and pray that somebody sensible, like maybe Witkoff, will speak truth to them and say, look, we've had it with your venture against Iran. The Russians and the Chinese are involved now. That's big for us. Don't even think of it. Just to finish Gaza, which is what Trump has
You,
said.
you
Finish
know, some
Gaza.
people are saying that they strongly believe that a war is about to break out. And part of the problem is that the U.S. has no credibility on this. I mean, the United States effectively gave Iran assurances that while they were negotiating, nothing would take place. And it was obvious that the United States was in on it. Donald Trump started crowing almost immediately when the decapitation strike took place. And only after it became very clear, oh my God, Israel is getting pounded and they can't stop it.
Right.
Did Trump, start put out tweets saying, "Hey, don't hit our boats. We'll be very angry if you hit our boats," and everything else. At that point, he got concerned because he realized this is an actual war that has started. If Israel uses a nuke, meaning we've accepted that Israel can pull the United States into the war. I don't believe for a moment that Trump would say stop. He hasn't said stop on anything else. And so if Israel attacks, Donald Trump is going to get involved. He would have to. He doesn't have to, but he will, just because up to this point he's shown no capability of saying no. What if Israel uses a nuke? I don't know what happens after that.
Well, no one does. And this is what gives me pause. In other words, there are indications that Trump now has seen the light. There are even signs that people like Eldridge Colby, Defense Department, the China hawk, okay, and revised the military guidance to say, look, we're a little bit overextended, and the Chinese are not any paper tiger, and let's pay attention to our own little Latin America and our own domestic problems. And so what happens? Trump takes off after drug traffickers, he calls terrorists, and kills what 17 of them on 3 boats. So we could do what we want. I see that as a strangely salutary development because it indicates that Trump may think, all right, look, I can show my power by shooting up, having my Navy, my God, have my Navy shoot up these little boats, and I don't have to support Netanyahu. Now, you're reflecting the majority opinion, and I already said all my advisors say that that Netanyahu is going to do this against Iran, and that Trump will have no option other than to support him. I dispute the latter because the implication of using even Trump, if not Trump, Witkoff, and there are some sensible people, even in the Defense Department, who would say, "Look, uh, we don't want it to come to that kind of end. Not only because of the obvious fallout, so to speak, but also Iran and the Houthis are going to destroy Israel. Is that what you want? Okay. Now Netanyahu might not give a rat's patootie, okay, because he wants to stay out of jail, for God's sake. And that's another personal factor in his mind. But we should care, and hopefully, this latest turn away from China and away from Ukraine, and we're going to take care of the threats by terrorists and little boats. That suggests to me that Trump knows a little better than he gives, that he exhibits when he talks. And somebody is saying, look, this is really dangerous. We don't have the forces to contend with Russian air defense, Chinese defense there in Iran. Lots at stake. China has a great dependence on Iran. Oil, for God's sake. You're bitten off more than you chewed before. Please don't do this. Now, that's a minority view, but I record it right now. It's the hope, prayer, really, that sense will prevail. There are these minor indications sense is prevailing, even if it's not good for Venezuelan boats that are offshore. And
Let me make, I guess, a majority view in this case. The E3 passes sanctions, effectively snapback sanctions on Iran. Now, the entire premise of
that again,
E3, so Europe passes snapback sanctions on Iran. Now, Iran made a deal saying, look, as long as we are, let's say, working with the IAEA, and you don't pass the sanctions, we will work with the IAEA. They pass the sanctions anyway. So Iran is going to stop all communication with the IAEA, and they may even pull out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, both of which was understood that when those sanctions went back on, that exactly was going to take place. Israel and the U.S. is going to use that as a premise, because that's the premise that they've been using the entire way through, to say, well, Iran is trying to build a nuke. They pull out of the NPT, and so now we are transcendentally justified of attacking Iran, despite the fact that Israel has nukes that are undeclared. That's the way I see it going. Like, they're going to use the NPT and not work with the IAEA as a trigger mechanism that they knew was going to be enacted at the very point at which those snapback sanctions came on. I hope you are right. I don't want Iran attacked, but these guys are lunatics. And I think, and just to add one last point, I saw the Eldridge Colby article where he was like, hey, let's focus on the issues that are associated with America. But if you've noticed, Donald Trump is still embroiled in Ukraine. He's still embroiled in the Middle East. And they just haven't been able to pivot to China. I mean, even if you say you go handle Russia, that's still being involved, right? Especially with the United States controlling NATO.
Well, not really. I think NATO is split asunder. I think no one in NATO can depend on the U.S. guarantee to invoke Article
Article
5.
5.
I think NATO is over. And I think Trump really has washed his hands of Ukraine. So that's a positive development. Now, again, a majority view is expressed quite well by what you say about what it looks like that Israel will go after Iran. But I would say that there are countervailing things here, some of which I mentioned.
Yeah.
Russia and China. The BRICS now, Iran is a member of the BRICS. There's a lot of reasons why level-headed people, if there are any around in Washington, say, Mr. President, you don't need to support Netanyahu on this because this is going to happen if you do.
Mhm.
Uh, Weapons, that's a new genre of conflict. We don't want to get involved in that. So these little indications that A, he turned back on Ukraine, B, he's decided to show his muscle by shooting up little boats carrying whatever in the Caribbean, and also Eldridge Colby's thing. Now, Eldridge Colby is an arch anti-China hawk. Okay, so
Yeah.
all we have is his new guidance, and nobody said a lot about it. But the Russians, of course, read all this stuff. So do the Chinese. And luckily, we have Xi Jinping and Putin are very cautious people. They play the long game, and they see that, well, Trump's around for 3 more years, but not after that. And maybe we can tamp this thing down during this time. So, um, the Middle East is again the source of immediate concern, but when you last thing here, and
Mhm.
this um, when Netanyahu used to come before the UN and show that big placard with a Ukrainian bomb, filled with uranium or plutonium up to just a little bit more, and all right, okay. So, what did the honest U.S. intelligence people say about that? They said, "Yes, the Iranians are not working on a nuclear weapon." Wow! When did they say that? They said that in 2007 in an estimate, a national intelligence estimate, which played a huge role in preventing a major war. Okay, how do I know that? Because I know the guy that managed this. His name is Tom Finger. They couldn't find an honest guy in the CIA. They went to the State Department, to the head of their intelligence. They said, "Look, we'll give you a year. You can bring your own analysts in, the ones that took the footnotes on that Iraq estimate, and we'll give you." So in November of 2007, the conclusion expressed with high confidence unanimously by all 16 at the time U.S. intelligence agencies is that the Iranians stopped working on a nuclear weapon at the end of 2003 and have not resumed work. Now, Tulsi Gabbard said the same thing so many years later. You do the math, in March of this year, 2025. And she added, there's no evidence that the supreme leader has reversed the religious fatwa against the weapon. My God, that was in March before he left. Bill Burns, whatever else you say about him, maybe his conscience got to him for all he told about Ukraine. But he said, "Look, remember, as I leave, Iran is still not working on a nuclear weapon, and no worries, uh, we will know very shortly if they begin working on a nuclear weapon." Now, what's the problem there? Well, you mentioned it. IAEA is not there anymore. Okay, they had all those cameras and stuff. I mean, you they that was part of the assurance. The other part was all the satellites that can monitor just about everything. But the third thing was the fatwa.
Mhm.
I asked my Iranian analysts, "What's a fatwa?" Well, they said it's a religious edict. It's much more important than an encyclical because the Iranians take it seriously. Okay, I said, "Well, could it be reversed secretly?" No, no, no. It would have to be debated in their parliament. It would be. It's a big public issue. If the supreme leader reversed the fatwa, we would know about it. Oh, Well, I take a little solace in that. So, has the fatwa been released? Not to my knowledge. Certainly not publicly. Is the IAEA in there? No anymore. That's the bad news. But we have all these other sophisticated devices. We know exactly what damage we did. We didn't obliterate much. Okay, we did do some damage, but nothing to prevent the progression of their nuclear program. And so, it's a complicated mix of things. But when these sanctions snap back, as they say, the Russians and the Chinese are going to react to that, as will the rest of the BRICS, of which Iran is now part. So it's a complicated situation. The fatwa is important. Nobody mentions that. I will. And all these other very overhead things, these satellites that monitor these, not only take pictures, but radiological, infrared, multispectral imagery. My God, they got it pretty much covered. So if Netanyahu comes to the UN again and says, well, here's now they're just 2% from getting the nuclear material, well, that's a diversion of attention because it's not the nuclear material, for God's sake. It's not the enrichment. It's the working on a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
Caveat
Ray,
there. They could do that secretly, and we wouldn't really know about it.
You are fantastic. I thank you for this. I really do. I always appreciate these conversations.
Well, that was a lot of fun. Thanks very much, Jamal.
No, thank you. And just for the audience, Ray McGovern. Ray McGovern is an American political activist and former Central Intelligence Agency officer. McGovern was a CIA analyst from 1963 to 1990. That's a hell of a career. And in the 1980s, chaired the National Intelligence Estimates and participated in preparing the president's daily briefing. Ray, you have a fantastic rest of your day, man. Thank you for this. Be safe, okay?
My website is raymcgovern.com. If I forget to mention that, my son who runs it gets very angry.
I will put it in your bio. I will have it in your bio. Thank you for this. You be safe, okay?
Thank you.
Enjoy.
It's a pleasure.
Bye-bye. Oh, Ray is awesome. Ray is